very bright.
A little bright.
Yeah, need sunglasses. Actually, I should have brought a ball cap. That helps. All right, folks. Well, let's see. 8. That's not bad. We may have a couple more. There's, I think, 9 or 10 in this group. So 10. 10 is our number. And so let's get started. Welcome again to our second cohort session with our professor, Buita, and as she struggles with the snow and I struggle with the sun. I'm excited about today. Today is really close to my heart about really developing these conversations and community connections. This is something that I really believe we can do. And so without further ado, I'm just going to turn it over to our professor today.
All right.
And I'll wait for you to let me know when you want mute and unmute. How's
yeah.
That? Okay.
That sounds great.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, what I wanted to start with today is just a bit of a review from last session and kind of, we'll start with objectives first. So this session, we want to spend a little bit of time shifting our heads from thinking in a problem mindset to thinking in an asset mindset, and kind of having a bit of a conversation about what does that mean for us to think a little differently in terms of how we think about things and how we engage with things when we think about assets instead of problems. We're going to talk about the role of connectors in your community and really kind of have a bit of a conversation about you as connector. And then we're going to move into the work in the Born book, and we'll do a bit of a summary of kind of the first few chapters of that in terms of the role of community conversations and building community. And then hopefully we'll have a bit of time to kind of talk a little bit about what you guys are doing in your communities and how you're playing that role of connector and engaging in those conversations with relevant partners. So to start though, a bit of a review from last month. I want to have a bit of a conversation about something that stuck out for you from last month's session, something you've thought about, something that you've done differently based on our conversation, those little connections that you're making for yourselves. So last week, the Born book talked about the importance of building engagement. That when we create those opportunities for members of our community to engage with each other, that gives them the opportunity to develop trust in each other. And when you've got trust in each other, then there's that opportunity to provide support to each other in times of need. So we've got people that we can rely on because we've got that trust. But it's not just about having people to rely on in times of need. It's also about having those opportunities for enjoyment, to just be together, to have fun together. And out of each of those pieces comes that ability to share our gifts, that sense of having something to offer and that willingness to offer it because we know the people that we're sharing it with. When we're able to share our gifts, and we're going to go into that in a little more detail today, we can talk about it increasing our self-efficacy, increasing our self-esteem. We know that we feel better about ourselves when we're able to offer something to others. And that out of that altogether, we have that ability to work together to make a difference in our world and in our communities. So I just wanted to check and see whether what pieces of our conversation last week or last month stuck with you, and maybe some examples of how it made sense in your communities. So maybe we can unmute and...
They are unmuted.
Okay.
Some of them are. They've muted themselves. Unmute all. Done.
What do you think? What stuck out for you? Any connections that you're making?
I think as far as I'm still in like congregational mindset and looking at how as a community we can engage in community and family services without necessarily having that label. So what does that look like? In that dimension, it's recognizing the people who have gifts and skills and abilities in certain areas and just inviting them to share those at the right times when I have I need the task done, and instead of trying to figure it out myself, but to phone and say, hey, can you help me with this? And there's just one thing we did about a month, within the last month, but 3-4 weeks ago, and we wanted a banquet table set up at church, and someone put a bug in my ear that one of our congregation members used to be involved in wedding planning. And it was a quick message, hey, could you just I have this crazy idea, and can you just help me a little figure out what we can just gather and bring to build this banquet table, and just share. And it was beautiful.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah. Other thoughts? Other times when the gifts of the community have had that opportunity to be connected?
One thing I've started this week is a community needs page on Facebook. One of the programs that we run, it's called Sonia's Cradle, where we work with young parents. Once a month, we give them emergency diapers, wipes, clothing, anything basically that they're needing. And a lot of the items we have already and things get donated, but a lot of the things that we don't have. So the community needs page is basically, I'll put needs out for the week, and anyone who's connected on Facebook then reads those needs. And if they have it, like I had a lady who needed baby gates, we don't have those, and put that on the needs page. And that same day, someone I knew had baby gates. So basically, yeah. And every week the needs change, and putting the needs out there, and if anyone can meet those needs.
That's great. That's great. That's really getting at what we're going to talk about today in terms of connectors. Yeah. How about others? Anything jumping out at you from last week in terms of, that ability to support each other, to build relationships, not just between you as a pastor or you as a care provider, but even between community members themselves as they build their circles of support?
Actually, I know I've already spoken, but can I just add one more thing?
Yeah.
Mention.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm new to this position, but I've been with the Salvation Army for about 5 years, an shelter advocate, and now I'm community advocate. But what was great was this last week, one of my clients from years ago, who was a shelter client, who's now living in the community, living on his own, doing well. He actually came in because there's a senior in his building, and he just wanted to make sure that the senior was getting all the services he should be getting with regards to his pensions and all that. He wasn't really sure. So he came in because he knew I was here, and he'd made that connection already with me. Asked if it would be okay if the senior could call me, which he did. And he was getting everything that, he should be getting. But I just thought that was great.
Yeah, people looking out for each other, right?
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to create in our communities. People taking care of each other so that it's not just, it brings us into this next quote that I have. And I posted this on the Facebook page before. But I want to get your feedback on it in terms of how this speaks to you in terms of the kinds of things that we provide. Care is the freely given commitment from the heart of one to another. No system can mandate, manage, produce, or provide this kind of care. And one of the quiet tragedies of the 20th century is that we've accepted the idea that institutions rather than families, neighbors, and associations are the primary sites of care. This mistaken understanding is the cause rather than the solution of many of our problems. So what do you think about that? How does that connect or resonate with you in terms of the work that you're doing and the communities that you're living and working in?
Well, for us, we are fairly new in our position here, and I found that in the food bank and also the drop-in center that we are running here, it does feel like we are an institution. People come, people get what they need, and they leave. So I've made some signs and saying if you would like to volunteer, these are the positions we have available. Thrift store, food bank, we have quite a few. And it was quite discouraging to see that not one person, and we have about 400 a month coming through our doors, not one in the last months have come in and said, hey, I'd like to help, so that was a little discouraging. And, it does feel that we are here an institution that's providing a service, and it is not a community. There is no, we have, we're supposed to have a drop-in center where people come and have, coffee and engage in conversations, but unfortunately they have coffee and they leave, right? So it's, as I think about the community since last month when we talked last, I feel like there's a lot to be changed
Okay.
in our ministry unit.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and hopefully we can give you some ideas around that, because yeah, you want this to be a place where people are able to recognize their gifts as well as offer them, right? And I think, you know, what Bourne talks about in that book from last month, and again the one this month, you know, that sense that we need to build relationship and build connection with each other. We need to engage with each other, and conversations are where we start with that. So yeah, thinking about, okay, in the drop-in center, how do we create and encourage a space for conversation? Yeah. Any other last thoughts?
Well, I know us, when I have food bank on, usually the recycling truck falls on the same day that food bank is on. So I just put a sign up on the food bank door saying, food bank isn't going to be open until we load this recycling truck. And would you like to come? We could use help. You know, anyone that would like to come and help is welcome. And that quite often gets a few of them come out that help that don't normally help.
Yeah.
And some of them have built from there. They've helped us with other things and that. So, you know, that's a way of engaging them and, you know, making them feel like they're contributing.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, I'm going to, like, you guys are talking about great stuff here that's going to lead us into our conversation about assets. So I'm going to move us forward. And Peter, maybe if you mute us all, and you can listen to me for a little while, and then we'll open it up for conversation again in a bit. Okay, so the power of assets, and where he comes from is kind of talking about the history of the new settlers in North America, and the fact that they didn't have professional services that they could rely on for things. They had to do it themselves, and they couldn't do it alone. They had to, what they ended up doing was forming associations where early settlers brought their own gifts, talents, skills together, and they banded together to form associations to help each other and to kind of get by. I am jumping ahead there. Now I'm going to jump back. And when we think about what happens in our community when it's identified by its problems, as opposed to when it's identified in terms of gifts, abilities, and talents. And maybe Peter will kind of unmute us again for a bit of a conversation here. But I want you to think a little bit about the communities that you're living and working in. Are they communities that are primarily identified as problem communities? And what happens to the community and the individuals in it when you think about it in terms of problems, as opposed to talking about gifts, abilities, and talents? And if you want to think about it in terms of that video that I posted on YouTube, in terms of Shani Graham's street, the woman from Australia who was originally from BC, I think. But she made a massive change on her street when they began to not think about it in terms of problems, and they all kind of signed on to this issue about sustainability that allowed them to kind of develop and think about the gifts and talents and abilities that they each had. But what does it look like in your communities? Are they problem communities, or are they gifted communities? What do you think?
I think ours is Fort St. John is pretty small, so it's both. It's really we have a lot of people who are quite wealthy and they are very generous with their money, but not many are generous with their time. And I think that's our biggest concern is that we don't have supporters who are here to support us practically, you know, or and when we think about doing any kind of community activity, we are always running into problems of not having people doing it, basically. So even picking up donations, it's, you know, I'll be going picking up donations simply because I'll call 10 of our volunteers and nobody is available or willing.
Yeah, and that's challenging. And then, and we kind of get into this cycle of seeing our community through the eyes of problems then, right? Instead of kind of thinking about who are we as gifted people. And Peter, I think he's got his stuff on mute, probably because he's in Tim Hortons and it's a little loud there. But Peter was saying we're all gifted, right? And I think in some ways it's a matter of figuring out what are the gifts that we do have, what are the things that we can offer. And so if I can't offer to kind of come and help with the pickup or the drop off or whatever it is, Tatiana, that you're needing help with, what are the things that I can offer? Yeah. Was there anything that stood out for you guys? Were you able to watch the Shani Graham video? Did some of you see that? No, I know everybody's busy.
I
Hey,
watched it. It's great. It's actually, yeah, well worth it. I think it was fascinating to see. Not only like I really liked the piece that she gathered people around the common purpose of sustainability, and I liked that piece because I think sometimes we only tend to gather our people around a shared faith experience. And I thought, man, that was really powerful to see how it was done in it with a different center, and not to say, you know, either one, but just recognizing the difference and how to be able to get people on board with that and be willing to kind of put themselves forward. I love the directory. This is the directory of people's skills, but also what they were interested in learning more about.
Yeah.
And how we could, you know, share those larger resources like the lawnmower or washer or something.
Yeah, if you need a trolley to move your fridge, no, everybody knows that Larry has the trolley, and so you go to Larry for that, right? Yeah, and we're going to talk about that more in a few minutes, kind of that sense of how do we identify what our assets are. Tatiana, too, I think you were kind of alluding to the fact that sometimes we don't know what our gifts are, and we think we don't have gifts or we have nothing to offer, and so I want to kind of dive into that a little bit more to help us kind of figure out what we do have that we can share. And then I think it's about kind of creating a space where people are engaged enough to want to offer things of themselves. Let's mute for a second here, and I'm going to move us forward again. Okay, so let's see here. So the power of our gifts. So McKnight talks about gifts in a lot of different ways. And one of the things that that I didn't put on my slides here, but I've talked about it in a class that I have on community development, is looking at gifts of the head, of the hands, and of the heart. So kind of when you just say, what are your gifts or what are your talents or what are your abilities, often people don't know what to say, right? We're humble. We're not used to thinking of what we're able to offer. Most often the individuals that we work with have been so beaten down by the system that they're only thinking in terms of need, right? Well, I can't do this and I can't do that and I need help with this and I need help with that. And so instead of thinking about what we can't do, to think about what are those skills, gifts, and abilities that we can offer. So when we think about the head, what kinds of knowledge do we have that can be shared? What do you know? What can you teach? So you might be somebody who is musical and can teach piano lessons. You might know a lot about finances. You might know a lot about parenting. What are those kinds of things that you have to offer? And it's not just, you know, university professors who have knowledge to share. There's all kinds of knowledge out there that I do not have and that I need to turn to somebody else to gain some of that ability. It's tax season right now. We all need help with our taxes, things like that. Thinking about the hands, what are the kinds of things that you're able to do? I am not a plumber, but you know, when my toilet is broken, I don't want to necessarily have to call a plumber to get my little flippy thingy to jiggle properly and flush my toilet. Is there somebody in the community that I know of that I can call on that can help to fix that thing? It might be woodworking, it might be knitting, it might be painting, it might be babysitting. I think in the Shani Graham video, I know that there was like a young kid who was able to offer up computer technology or things like that. You know, helping the older people in the community figure out how to use the iPad so that they can communicate with their grandchildren or whatever it is. So what are those things that you can do? And then the last piece is the gifts of the heart. What is it that you care about? What's your passion? What is it that you're compassionate about? Is it, do you have a heart for animal rights? Do you have a heart for children, a heart for the elderly? What is it that you're compassionate about? Where's your intensity and your energy? And how can your belief in your dreams and desires be an asset to be shared? So it's not just about, you know, it's creating the space to help people figure out that yes, they do have something to offer. And when we are able to offer our gifts, then we get to the place of understanding that we can take responsibility for our families and for our communities. That sense of self-efficacy grows, that sense of self-esteem, that ability to say, yeah, I can do something. when we use the power of our gifts, we're able to feel supported. We are able to offer support, and we're able to feel supported by other people as well. We build new connections and new relationships, and we get ourselves from that downward spiral where it's all problem focused. We kind of move back upwards, and we build new connections and new relationships. Well, I can offer this to you, and you can offer this to me. My husband has a saying, I'm sure it comes from somewhere, about taking from the left and giving to the right. So it's not that sense that somebody has given to me and therefore I need to give directly back to them in terms of that reciprocal piece. I am given a gift by somebody, and I may not reciprocate directly to that person, but I can reciprocate to somebody else. And so that circle kind of keeps on growing with newer connections and new relationships. And then we have that sense that we realize that even without money, we can do much. And I know that working as congregations, you know you don't have much money, but there's a lot that you can do despite not having much money, especially when you can get people engaged with each other, believing in the same vision, and that willingness to kind of work towards something. The power of our gifts, when we offer our gifts, we're able to build trust, which brings security. That sense that we can rely on each other, that we've got people in our lives who believe in us. When we engage with people, when we build relationships, we are more likely to offer ourselves again and to reach out into new situations. And we feel powerful, right? When we have that opportunity to do something for somebody else, yeah, it affects us. Somebody in the last session was talking about how proud people feel when they're able to, you know, somebody who brought in some mint from their backyard and offering it to other people, or helping somebody else with moving, and seeing the bounce in their step and the pride that they feel when they're able to do something. So those are important things. And together, as we build those relationships, we create a history together. We create that sense of identity, that sense of who we are together as a group of people. So when we have our gifts identified, the other thing that McKnight talks about is the power of associations. And associations for him are that linking of people together. So linking somebody who has a gift and a skill with somebody who has a need. And you guys have already talked about that. You do that in your communities. So bringing people together. And when you have associations of people who are working together, the power of that association that he talks about is that ability to decide what needs to be done. So it's not the outside expert, the social worker coming in and saying, well, you need to do this, 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 and this. No, this is the people in their community who together determine what needs to be done. And they determine together how to do what needs to be done. So it's not just, you know, we have a problem with poverty. It's, you know, okay, our challenge is poverty, but we don't want somebody else telling us what to do. Together, we're going to figure out how we're going to address this issue in a way that makes sense in the particularity of our situation and our community. And then together, when you work together with associations, you've got neighbors joining together to do the work that needs to be done. And the conversations that Paul Bourne has in his book that we're studying, we're going to get to that in a minute, talk a lot about how is it that we do this work, how is it that we gather together, figure out what needs to be done, how to do it, and sign on together, commit to each other to do what needs to be done. So the important piece, and this is the piece that I see you folk in your Salvation Army units as being the key piece. I see you as the leaders in your community, in your congregations, as well as the communities that you're living in. You play that role of connector. So connectors to McKnight are gift-centered people. These are people who see the gifts of the people in the community. And so that's why where somebody may not have the ability to identify the gifts for themselves, whether they're too humble to do that, whether they're too beaten down in the role of being a needy person to be able to identify their gifts, your role is to help bring that out in people, to help them to identify what they have to offer. So we need you to be gift-centered people who can look for and find the gifts that other people have to offer. Connectors are also people who are well connected and who are very active in their community. these are people who, you know what's going on. You know who to connect with to talk about, to find out, well, what happened at the grocery store down there? Somebody said that there was a big problem down there. Well, you as connectors are going to know who to talk to kind of figure things out. Who are the movers and shakers in your community? And that's not just the people who are in formal organizations. You're going to know that as well. But you also know and have connections with just the individual people. Connectors are people who are trusted by others, and that takes time, right? That takes these conversations that we've been talking about are what you need to be having with members of the community to build up that level of trust, so that they know when they come to you with a problem, you know. So I'm forgetting, was it Sherry or Tatiana? Somebody was talking about somebody who had come to them to say that a person had a need, and they wanted to make sure that this other person was getting the services that they deserved, right? And so to be that connection, to be that person that's trusted, that somebody's going to come back to you and say, hey, I'm concerned for this person, and I know that you're going to do right by them. So that sense of being trusted is important. And that belief in the people of your community. If the community doesn't feel believed in, they're not going to be able to move forward. And so we know that you are going to be one of those people who really truly believes in the ability of the community to overcome, the ability of the community to have strengths and capacities and gifts that you can draw on to make that a better place. And the last piece, I think, is kind of that sense of getting joy from connecting, so that this isn't just a job for you. This isn't just a, you know, something that you kind of go through because you have to go through. You get a joy from doing this, from bringing people together, from making connections, inviting people to connect and to see the wonderful things that can happen when people turn to each other and rely on each other. So that is, yeah, that's a significant piece for connectors as well. Okay, maybe I'll pause for a second here and let's unmute for a second, see if there's any questions. Is this stuff making sense?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah? Okay. Well, I'll keep us going then, and I want to do a bit of a survey of some of the pieces that Paul Bourne talks about then, because I think that his book right into taking that concept that McKnight has about connectors, and he kind of teases that out and talks a little bit about more of the concrete pieces of what that looks like in terms of what you can do to build those connections. So the first thing that he talks about is conversing. And again, this builds on the first book that we were working with in terms of deepening community. And so for Paul, everything starts with creating space for dialogue and conversation. He talks about listening, and listen with an exclamation mark, so that it's not just you know, yeah, kind of hearing with one ear and in one ear and out the other. He talks about listening as active listening, to gain a corner on the obvious. And this was kind of one of those strange phrases that you kind of go, huh, what does he mean by that? But my sense of it is that to gain a corner on the obvious is to figure out things that might seem strange to us but are obvious to the other person. So putting ourselves in the other person's shoes to gain a bit of a sense of what their lived reality is. I've got a quote that on my calendar, just on my desk here, and it says, if we want to understand someone, we put ourselves into his skin. The only way to understand fully is to become the object of our understanding. So again, we're kind of really trying to put ourselves into the shoes of the other person to understand what their reality is. So we're not just hearing, listening, not just to hear, but to understand. And this, if we're really listening well, this can lead to really good dialogue and active engagement, that together we engage in meaning making. So dialogue then is about that shared experience, that shared conversation, where together we understand the meaning of the other person, they understand the meaning from our perspective, and together we create a new sense of meaning about whatever it is that we're talking about. So we're stepping into the meaning that another person brings. So yeah, like I think there's no shortcut to good conversation. And so sometimes I think with your cores and with the places that you have, the drop-in centers that you have, how do you make it a place where people are willing to sit and have conversations? The last session, people talked about what would happen if we didn't just have 10 minutes to do an intake with a person. What would happen if we wouldn't give time limits to those kinds of things? How do we create that space for ourselves to converse and listen and kind of step into the shoes of the other? But how do we do that in a way that our community members can engage with each other and learn from each other too? Okay, so when we've got good conversation, when we've listened for meaning, when we've really kind of allowed ourselves to enter into what's going on for the other person, there are expectations that come out of that. Expectations will follow from engagement. We're at that place where when we really engage with somebody and we really hear their story, then we can't just say, oh, that doesn't matter. Then we're kind of at the place where we need to do something about that. So yeah, Bourne talks about the fact that if you're working in a community, and his second book is less about kind of the individual relationships and more about how do we as an organization, how do we create an organization that's motivated towards community change on a particular issue. And so for him, it was about having lots and lots and lots of conversations with all of the various stakeholders within the community that can help you to engage in terms of what's meaningful for change around that particular issue. And so we've also got the issue of single sector versus multi-sector engagement and conversation. And I think he would suggest that involving the sectors of business, of government, and of volunteers, as well as those who are affected by the issue, that those sectors are all ones that are important to include. That if you just do a single sector survey and engagement, you're probably going to be missing pieces, and that there'll be more buy-in and more engagement if you include each of those sectors. The other piece with that is that when you're kind of figuring out who to have the conversations with, he talks about bringing together unusual suspects. So bringing together people you might not expect, making sure that you're connecting with those people on the margins, those that are strangers, connecting them to hear what their thoughts and their issues are. Okay, I've got a comment here from Peter, I think. Are you okay if I share this, Peter? Have you ever waited outside community and family services waiting to get in like a client and then the doors don't open on time? That's wearing their shoes. Real expectations come from real engagement. If we're being asked about unreal expectations, then have we really engaged, right? So kind of having that sense of figuring out what's realistic to expect here. And I think absolutely taking that opportunity to pretend you're a client and go into your programs there can be really valuable information. When we think about unusual suspects, making sure that we hear the voices of the service users, engaging those people who are on the margins, those people who are most affected by the problem. We know that we're also going to have to deal with the role of power. So when you've got people who are coming into these larger, broader conversations where you've got business members who are, millionaire people carrying a lot of weight, they're spokespeople in their community. You've got government officials that are working through issues that have lots of experience on particular issues, experts in their field. And if you get a client or a service user in that room, how empowered are they going to be to kind of share their experience? So making sure that we address and create spaces where power is used in good ways. Yeah. And there's lots of, each of these could be, a session in itself. And so there's further reading that you can do on each of these, but I'm just touching on them. Relying on human goodness. So rather than assuming that humanity is awful, thinking about problems only, think about it instead of what we can't do or what the problem is, what's wrong. Start with the question of who cares and what's possible. So by asking who cares, you're going to be drawing in the people who are most invested in finding a solution, those people who care about this issue. And thinking about what is possible instead of what the problem is. Think about what's possible. You get to dream, you get to be creative, you get to kind of figure out what might come to be if we all care about this and move together on an issue. Paul Bourne then goes on to talk about collaborating, and this is where he talks, he's got a 5-stage process, and this is really about organizational development. So if you're with a community-based group who's working on an issue, there are some functional kinds of things that you're going to end up doing, phases that you're going to go through in your work together that are going to help to consolidate and the work that you're doing. So first he talks about vision, and that the vision emerges through conversations. So again, it comes back to conversation. When we have good conversation, meaningful conversation, where we've entered into the reality of the other person, together then we can reach towards something that we want to change, that vision of what we want to be different. When people have been heard, then you have that ability for people to really buy into what you're talking about. You're building community will. So this means kind of taking it from an issue that maybe 2 or 3 people have to building it out so that you've got people from other stakeholder groups begin developing a common understanding of the issues, figuring out who are the multi-sector groups that we want to make sure that we're bringing on board with this. You're getting it to be something that the community is going to buy into. And then you're going to create the conditions for success. And this is where organizational development is going to come out. So developing an organization with leadership, with governance, thinking through financial pieces, technical resources, all of those kinds of things that need to be in place for the work to get more efficiently and effectively done. Action, leadership, learning, and change. Here he talks about the fact that as we grow, we're going to have certain small interventions that we do, and that we're going to build on those interventions. When we see some small success, then we'll build on that towards larger success. Implementation of those earlier initiatives, we're going to raise awareness and figure out some actions that we can take and move forward with that. And then finally, you'll get to the place where you need to do a bit of an evaluation and figure out, well, have we accomplished what we set out to accomplish? Are we moving into a wind down phase? Or is this something where, well, we've had some small success, but there's some other things that we need to continue working on. Maybe we need to shift our goals a little bit. Maybe we need to shift the people who are involved. In community-based organizations, you'll often see transitions in leadership, and that's normal and natural, but kind of building that in and figuring out how to work that through. Sorry. So then the last piece that he talks about is casting the vision. And with this one, he's talking about using community conversations, again, to gain a corner on the obvious. So when we have good community conversations, we're listening for the meaning that the other person is bringing, and we have that opportunity to kind of, come to some consensus on what we're seeing as the issue. So gain that corner on the obvious. Listening for engagement with the whole system, making sure that we're putting ourselves in the shoes of the other, that we've got dialogue that allows for shared meaning, and that when we have that shared meaning, we can understand the system and see those entry points for change. So, we've got that multi-sector involvement. We know what it is that we want to make a difference on, and where the best methods are to do that. And if we've had good conversations and we've understood the system, we're going to be able to find words and concepts that motivate everybody, that keep us all engaged. And so because you've built trust, you've had real engagement, you're going to have a vision that resonates with everybody. Okay. So when we think about what this means then, the goal of community conversations is to build engagement to affect change on issues that are challenging the community. I've got a couple of examples of things here. I think the Shawnee Graham video is a great one that kind of shows you what that local community can do just even in a street. Richland Together, Let's Connect. This is another YouTube clip, and I'll put this up on the Facebook page as well. But it's a real quick, short video that talks about asset-based community development and what it can look like. Richland is a county in Wisconsin, and they talk about the seniors. There's a seniors organization there, and it just goes through some examples of how connectors work to kind of bridge seniors with each other and with organizations that can help them. The Halo project is an interesting project, and it looks at monetizing the contributions of local congregations to the community. So figuring out the green space that a church has to offer, or the weddings that are done there, or the concerts that are held there, much less all of the programming that happens in terms of food banks or counseling or Narcotics Anonymous groups that meet there, all of those kinds of things. And they found that if you want to look at the value, the monetary value that our congregations have to the community, for every dollar in programs that a congregation offers, the city gets $4.77 worth of common good services. So those are $4 worth of goods that the community, that the government in the city would otherwise have had to provide themselves. So it's a significant contribution that we as a congregation are making to the communities that we live in. Okay, so what role do you play in creating space for connection and conversation in the work that you do, and who are the partners that you connect with? Let's open it up for some conversation. We've got about 15 minutes left here, and I want to hear more from you guys in terms of what questions do you have, what are the connections you're making, how does this fit with the work that you're doing? Any thoughts?
I've joined a few local community leagues, and sometimes the meetings are good because it gains insight into what the smaller neighborhoods are doing and how we can possibly partner with them. So some have been really beneficial. We've just been invited to simple, like a skating party, one of them had, and so that was really helpful in making more connections with others. Some even social workers that live in the neighborhood and who work with the folks there. So it was networking, but it was also good to meet some of our neighbors that we don't normally see because they're not necessarily clients.
Right.
They just live nearby.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Yeah. Other thoughts? It makes me think a little bit more of the Kretzmann and McKnight stuff. They've got, if you Google asset-based community development and go to their website, one of the things that they talk about is connecting associations with each other. And so kind of doing a bit of a survey, asset maps to know what are the associations and the organizations that are in your community and what kinds of things do they have to offer. So often we'll see churches that are closed down 6 days of the week, right? And I don't think that this is the case in the Salvation Army churches, but sometimes other churches are only used once a week. And they've got this huge space that could be used by the community. And how do we figure that out? How do we share the knowledge about that so that others can come in and use that space? Churches have video equipment, they have space. We have, like, what else do your congregations have, your churches have, that could be shared by the broader community?
We have a gym that we've been trying to promote people to use, but we're in the process of making a new rental policy, which kind of hinders things a bit when it comes to like liability, of course.
Yeah.
But it's there. So once that's good to go, I'd like to see, we've already had some inquiries from like youth groups wanting to come in because they don't have one in their church. So I think that's an easy way to work together.
Yeah, that's great.
I know our space, we give a space to AA, uses it one night a week. And previously we had a counselor that would come in and use an office to meet with clients. We try to put it out there that our space gets used for not just church. Although our church is right in our thrift store, so we have these movable walls that when we have church Monday nights, we push the clothing racks off to the side and put these movable walls up so our space gets used.
Yeah,
all the
that's
time.
Great. And Peter just noted that Kiwanis music festivals, like our Piano and Sanctuary, and that's a big one these days. We've got kids are all involved in the Kiwanis festivals right now. Yeah. If you think as well about what are the other organizations or associations in the community that would have things to offer that could be used to meet the community's needs. Like what are some of the other associations and organizations that could be connected with?
Here in Maple Ridge, we're a small community, but one of the things that I love about us is that we are so connected with other social service providers, with other churches, we have, I think it's about 5 different not outreach workers, but 5 different organizations with outreach. And all of us, I mean, I'm not particularly outreach, that's not my position, but through working in this community for as long as I have, just being connected with those services and knowing who to call. I'll have Cheryl from Alouette calling me. She has something that want help with one of her clients that she knows that we can offer, and those sorts of things.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got another note here too from Peter talking about public health was a great connector with the province, I think, and the police hosts roundtables of different agencies, and that was a piece that I was thinking of as well, is like that in Winnipeg here we sometimes have community policing is becoming a little bit more prevalent. I don't know a whole lot about it, but if you think about the effect that the police have as an authority figure, and that people are so often scared of the police. And if you can have the police be a more natural part of the community, that can often be a really good thing. Yeah. What are other things that you guys are doing that, how can you as social service organizations and as congregations, how can you create space to have conversation? And maybe I want to come back, forgetting now if it was Tatiana, if it was you that was kind of talking about that challenge with getting people involved in volunteering, that people kind of come in for the service and then they leave, for the service, meeting like a food bank or whatever it is that they've come in to do. But how do you create a space where people can connect with each other as opposed to just being a service that you provide for them?
Well, I know us in our thrift store, we have tables set out and coffee and snacks like all day, every day of the week kind of thing that we're open. And the regulars come in all the time, and it's amazing how much they, visit with each other. They'll look out for each other. They'll help each other, and they just, are connecting together. So I think that's a really important thing to have, that it's a safe space for them to come. If they run into someone that's new into town and that person needs something, they'll bring them on into us and we can help them get what they need.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so you're playing that role of connector, but they're also doing the connecting too, right? They're kind of drawing people in and bringing them to you. Yeah.
I think we need just more fun in our building.
Yeah.
Right now it is more about, providing people with what they need, whether it is helping them with their taxes and, doing things for them basically. And I think it's hard right now because it's winter time. So there's, not many places available to have the fun, but we have talked about, using even our emergency disaster truck that we have to maybe have a community barbecue or something. And we'll have to look into, that, but basically go to a local park and provide hot dogs and bring in people, like both the people who use our services, but as well as our partners, because I think there's a big gap between the people as well here. So that's been a little challenging.
We've done that before, and we just on the outside of our building, we just got white tablecloth and taped it the outside of our building and projected a movie right on the side of our building.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, we did. It was in the fall. There's certain timing you have to do it where it has to get dark a little bit sooner, but it's not too cold out, so we kind of have to do it in the fall. But we had a lot of people come out, and all the neighbors around heard the movie, and so yeah, it was kind of a fun evening, yeah.
That's great. How about others? What else are you guys doing to have fun and build connections?
I think we're a portable church, so we don't have said space, but we make use of space in the community. So we might meet at a local school gym or a restaurant for the men's breakfast, in people's homes, at a kind of community hall area in the middle of a townhouse complex for a women's yoga thing. So we are kind of out there. We're forced to be out there. But still, I think there's a mindset even within our people that we need to continually cultivate this idea that it's not just up to the professionals. Because I've tried to have these conversations, and where do you see assets or needs in your community? How do you kind of think about that? And some people are quite resistant. They're like, that's your job, go figure it out. And so trying to draw on them, but not necessarily tasking them with an assignment, but to try and hear and listen and
Well, and when it becomes your problem to solve as the professional, then it's just, there's a no-win situation, right? You know, the client is going to be able to blame you if it doesn't work, and they're also not going to feel the success of it themselves in the same way, because it's been done for them instead of something that they have done themselves. And it's a hard balance to find, but yeah, you raised some really good challenges there. Yeah. Are there any particular issues that you guys have worked on as a community, needs or whatever, that's kind of issues that are affecting your community, where you've had good opportunities to engage different stakeholders, to have good conversations and kind of move forward in addressing something?
I'm actually looking forward to one that I'm hoping to have. The township is putting together a social services sustainability task force. And looking at all kinds of issues from food security, and it's amazing actually the breadth of it. So I've gruped application, waiting to hear if I can be part of that.
Great. Yeah. Any other ventures you guys have been a part of?
I love partnering with the local library, because they're so excited to come and be a part of any kind of community event. So we had a community kitchen last week, and the people library cards in our building, which was really awesome, because I think there's one lady who came and she rented like 3 books that she didn't know the library had. And they also said they're eager to come and read books to kids if we need help with childcare and a bunch of different things. So I didn't think partnering with the library would be so awesome.
That's one of those unusual suspects, right? Those people that you don't really think about, that can really make a huge difference. Peter is talking about smoking and tobacco use in our community, as well as being invited to assist our county in developing a drug strategy. So that's some of the partnerships that the Salvation Army there has been involved in. Yeah, so how do we address those larger issues? Yeah.
I know I'm part of a group called Partners to End Poverty, and it brings together us, social services, Kids First. There's the Newcomers Association. There's a bunch of us all together, work together on different projects, and we've done different things. Like, it's really good partnership because you all help each other out. We've done the Fill a Backpack program. That's how our income tax program started. We've done where we've given in the fall, given things for people to winterize their rental homes, like the plastic you put on the windows, that kind of thing. So a lot of good projects that have come out of that partnership. So that's been a really good partnership for us. Yeah,
that's great. That's great. Yeah, it's really neat to see all of those things that you can do when you have, when you have those good connections with other stakeholders, and then also having the people that are most affected at the table, right? And do you guys have examples of some of the things that you do to involve community members, clients in the work that you're doing, or in the visions that you're creating?
So we have a transitional housing facility here, and what we do is we encourage our residents to volunteer at our food bank. And actually, the way it started was by one of the residents coming and asking us first if she could volunteer, and it ended up being, now we have 4 of them, you know, coming on regular basis. So that's kind of has been neat to see people having time and trying to give back the way they can. So that was really neat.
That's great. Well, I think we're getting close to the end of our time. I think I'm going to pass it back to Peter. I don't know if you're able to open up your audio and connect with us again, but I have so much appreciated having these conversations together. And I know that you've got a couple more sessions over the next 2 months to continue the conversation.
Well, we want to thank our professor, Juita, all the way from snowy Winnipeg. It has been awesome to have you a part of this. Thank you so much for jumping into this and providing great insight and just great leadership. So thank you first and foremost for your participation and involvement. It's
been great for me too to hear about what all you guys are doing and just the amazing work that you guys are doing in every place that you are found. It's wonderful.
Well, hopefully this is just the beginning of a wonderful relationship, as they say. So
absolutely.
You all know where she lives and who she is and where to find her.
Send me an email.
We have your email, and we'll get your phone number next. And, but thank you. And this has been a great start to this cohort, and I really want to thank you for that. Also, as we've just said, it's just our second lesson. We have 2 more coming. Lieutenant Colonel David Bowles will be joining us next month, and that is going to be an excellent session. I encourage you to continue reading Paul Bourne's book as you prepare for that. Also, just want to remind you about the coaching opportunities that have been given to you. Hopefully by now you've already had your first and maybe your second coaching. If you haven't, please let me know, and we'll follow up with Major Gale and see what's going on. I know from participating in the cohort last year that the coaching was probably one of the most significant parts of the cohort that I was involved with last year. So please take full advantage of that. That is a wonderful addition to this program, as well as just kind of a poke and a tease for you this afternoon or this morning if you're way over there, to say use our Facebook group. So far we've had a couple of likes, but I really want to see some engagement in there, some wrestling with the material, some dialogue, even, you know, just play with it like Play-Doh. Just have fun with it, mold it, shape it, twist it, break it apart, but let's have some fun there. This is our community where we can begin dialoguing, wrestling with some of these concepts and sharing what we're doing. This is where you can share back and forth about, hey, I heard you say this. What do you mean by that? What about this program? And it's really going to be an organic experience where we can come alongside and support one another outside of this opportunity. So please, please, please just don't like the posts, comment on the posts. Let's have some fun. I think that's it. I want to recognize Colonel Debbie Graves has joined us again this afternoon, and she'll be our 4th session leader. And if you have any questions, she will always be happy to answer as well. Folks, I just want to bless you as you continue on ministering and creating those connections. If I can encourage you this afternoon to be a domino connector, it's just that top link, domino, and multiple connecting. And as you minister, just remember our mission to share the love of Jesus Christ, meet human needs, and transform our communities. Lord bless you all. Take care. Have a great afternoon. Thank you again.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.